Alright, well, welcome back, and I know that we ended the last session, part 2 of chapter 7, on the electrolyte slide and moved into the acid-base slide. And I'm just going to quickly review the electrolyte slide and then move on to acid-base. And I thought that, I knew at some point in time that there would be some extensive discussion on acid-base, and that's actually in chapter 8. So this will be a short part 3. We've got a couple slides and then some chapter summary, and then we'll be back with chapter 8. So as I look at the electrolytes in the body, and these are substances that have both positive or negative charges, and they dissociate into charged particles when you dissolve them into water. And it's the charges of these particles and the combination of cations and anions that are important in allowing for good nerve impulse formation and transmission, muscle contraction, as we'll see, fluid balance in the body, and the major positively charged electrolytes in your body are called cations, and they include sodium, and the normal sodium level in the body is 135 to 145 milliequivalents per liter. And when you have a sodium level less than 135, that's known as hyponatremia because sodium is Na, and if you have a sodium level greater than 145, it's known as hypernatremia. Sodium is really important in the regulation of water in the body. It helps the body conserve water by conserving sodium, and the body can get rid of water by getting rid of sodium because water follows sodium. Potassium is another extremely important cation, particularly related to the heart, and that's where we'll see evidence of low potassium levels or high potassium levels by looking at the lead 2 ECG for the classic signs and symptoms of hyperkalemia, which are peak T waves and those sort of things that we'll learn later. But potassium levels are normally 3.5 to 5 milliequivalents per liter. Less than 3.5 is known as hypocalcemia, and greater than 5 milliequivalents per liter is known as hyperkalemia, and it is K hyperkalemia because the sign for potassium is K. Now calcium is extremely important for the rate of discharge in the heart, and certainly potassium levels that are out of whack will affect the heart rate, as well as neurotransmissions as well. And calcium levels less than 4.5 or hypocalcemia. Calcium levels greater than 5.5 in the blood are hypercalcemia. Magnesium, another important cation, and normal magnesium levels are 1.8 to 2.4, and levels less than 1.8 are known as hypomagnesemia. And in those situations we can get a lethal arrhythmia known as torsades, and we'll talk more about that certainly in the ACLS portion of our program. Now when we look at anions are negatively charged particles, and these negatively charged particles have a natural affinity to bind with the cations. As an example, chloride is an extremely important anion that helps balance the cations. Sodium chloride, that's table salt, and we have a lot of sodium chloride in our body. Potassium chloride and calcium chloride and magnesium chloride are all electrolyte combinations that we have in our body. Bicarbonate, HCO3 is the abbreviation for bicarbonate, and is the chemical symbol for bicarbonate is HCO3, and bicarbonate is a buffer, as we'll see here in the next slide, as is phosphate. Phosphate serves as a buffer, as well as in the production of DNA. Now when I look at acid-base balance, and I talk about acid-base balance. That's the next slide. There we go. Acid-base balance is extremely important. Maintaining a correct ratio of acids to bases inside your bloodstream in order for normal body function to occur. And the normal pH is 7.35 to 7.45. Anything less than 7.35, you have acidity, and anything greater than 7.45, you have alkalinity. So somebody with a pH of, as an example, 7.2 is said to be acidic, and somebody with a pH of 7.5 is said to be alkalytic. And there's a variety of reasons that people become acidic or alkalytic, and we'll discuss those in more detail in Chapter 8 as well as in our ACLS. But the acidosis and the alkalosis that you may have may be the result of a respiratory problem. As an example, if you breathe too fast and you blow off too much CO2, that will cause respiratory alkalosis and cause your pH to rise. If you don't breathe fast enough and you retain lots of CO2, like if your respiratory rate was 4, you're going to retain CO2, and that's going to cause respiratory acidosis and eventually lower your pH below 7.35. Same holds true with the metabolic component, and when we are in discussion of the acid-base balance in great detail, we'll look at ways to determine whether or not the pH that you see, either acidic or alkalytic, is caused by a respiratory problem or a metabolic problem or a combination of both. Now, when you have a condition where you have an acid-base disturbance, obviously your body has to have a way in order to manage that pH, to keep it between 7.35 and 7.45. Your cells need that. Your tissues need that in order to function properly. You get pHs less than 6.8. That doesn't seem like a lot from 7.35, but a pH less than 6.8 is not compatible with life. So you've got to have a way that when your body makes more acid, you have a way to get rid of it. Or when you need to keep acid because you're more alkaline, you've got to have a way to do that as well. And there are three main buffer systems to help with acid-base balance. The first one is the bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer system, and that's represented by the formula below. And again, when we talk in greater detail about acid-base balance, we'll go into much more of a discussion concerning this formula. But the bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer system works immediately, works in a fraction of a second, and is constantly shifting from one end of the equation to the other based on need, based on, as an example, on the very left-hand side of the formula, you have H, which is a hydrogen ion, and acids liberate hydrogen ions. So a condition where you have lots of acid in your bloodstream, you're going to have lots of hydrogen ions in your bloodstream. And the hydrogen ions are going to combine with the available bicarbonate that you have in your bloodstream to form carbonic acid. That's the H2CO3. That's carbonic acid. And carbonic acid dissociates quickly into CO2 and water, H2O and CO2. And you exhale that. So when a person has a lot of acid in their bloodstream, as in the case of diabetic ketoacidosis, they're going to breathe deep and rapid. And they're going to breathe deep and rapid to try to blow off all those hydrogen ions and get rid of them to help drop the hydrogen ion concentration and raise the pH. The respiratory system, kind of mentioned that already, is that you will increase and decrease your respiratory rate in an effort to either maintain or eliminate more hydrogen, which affects your acid-base balance. And your renal system does help balance acids and bases in your bloodstream by selectively eliminating and retaining bicarbonate ions, the HCO3. If there is a need to maintain bicarbonate ions, then your body will not secrete them. But if you have an excess of bicarbonate ions, then your body will secrete that out in your urine. Normally, the relationship between hydrogen and HCO3 is 1 to 20. For every one hydrogen ion, your body likes to keep 20 bicarbonate ions, because as your hydrogen ions increase quickly, you have that base excess to help buffer those. Okay. So in summary, it's important when we think about anatomy that the paramedic has to have a good understanding of the human anatomy, because it helps you organize your patient assessment. It helps you more clearly communicate the patient's illness or injury to those that you pass your care on to. Understanding physiology, how things work, will help you determine how a particular injury might affect a system in the body, or how a particular disease might affect a system in the body. Anatomic positions are important. That is, the correct anatomic position is standing straight up, palms facing the examiner, and from there we can draw all our directional terms like superior and inferior and anterior and posterior. Your skeleton is divided into two parts: the appendicular skeleton, which is the extremities to include the arms, the pelvis bones, and the legs, and then your axial skeleton, which includes the head, the neck, the thorax, and the abdomen. We know the abdomen is divided into 4 quadrants, and within those quadrants lie major internal abdominal organs, and that's why we divide the abdomen into 4 quadrants, to help us identify if there's a particular pain in a quadrant. We know what organs lie in that quadrant, and that might help us understand what's going on. The major cavities in the body are ventral and dorsal, and the subcavities of the ventral and dorsal cavities of the body include the thoracic cavity, the abdominopelvic cavity, the cranial cavity, and the spinal cavity. Of course, the thoracic cavity holding the lungs, the heart, and the 8 great vessels, part of the liver and part of the spleen. The abdominal pelvic cavity includes everything in the abdomen and pelvis, to include genital, urinary, and male and female reproductive organs. The cranial cavity, of course, holds your head. Cranial cavity is your head. It holds your brain and your brain stem, your cerebellum, cerebrum, and your brain stem. And the spinal cavity, of course, has your spinal cord. In addition to the heart, the lungs, and the 8 great vessels, in the thoracic cavity is the esophagus and the trachea and the thymus, the thyroid glands as well are in there. In the abdominal pelvic cavity, we kind of mentioned the organs that were in there, but we also have to remember that the superior vena cava travels down through the abdomen, as does the ascending aorta, or abdominal aorta, travels down through there as well. And then they bifurcate into the legs. And those are major vessels. We'll talk about AAAs, abdominal aortic aneurysm, and how life-threatening that can be, and how to identify it. We talked about cells, and the medium in which cells move around is cytoplasm, and within the cytoplasm are all the specialized structures of the cell, and that each of those structures has an important job in order to help the cell live. The nucleus controls all the other organelles that are in the cytoplasm. And we know that most human cells as well as plant cells have to reproduce by a process known as mitosis. And there are four types of, a collection of cells makes up tissue. And there are four types of tissue. There's epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. And each of those tissues are specialized, and each of them have specific functions. We also talked about how in the hierarchy of cells we've got the cellular level. A collection of specialized cells makes tissues. A collection of specialized tissues make an organ, and a system or group of organs makes a organism. The 10 major organ systems that we did discuss include the skin, the largest organ in the body. We talked about both muscle and bone, as well as nervous tissue. We talked about the endocrine glands and their functions. Talked briefly about the cardiovascular system and the lymphatic and immune system, and the respiratory system, digestive system, urinary and reproductive systems as well. As we go through the program, and as we have additional lectures, we will review the anatomy and physiology of each of these systems. So like when we start in the the medical portion of the program, and we're talking about cardiovascular system, we'll review the anatomy and physiology again. We talked about how the integumentary system was skin, and that also include the accessory structures within the skin: hair, nails, a variety of glands, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, and how the skin's responsible for protecting the body against injury, to prevent you from becoming dehydrated, to protect you from infection, and how the skin, through the release of sweat and the evaporation of that water, helps you both dissipate heat, and how those sweat glands can shut down and not dissipate heat if you need to retain heat. We talked about bone and the different types of bones, long bones, irregular bones, flat bones, and the associated connective tissue with bones, where you have ligaments and tendons. And always remember, ligaments, L-I-G, connects B to B, so a ligament connects bone to bone, where tendons connect muscle to bone. And cartilage is that soft bone that's necessary, particularly in those areas where there's no need for rigid support or there's area for movement. Bones provide a rigid framework to support and protect our body as well. When you think about the thoracic rib cage and how it protects our vital organs located within our chest. There are three primary functions of our muscular system. They include movement, they include maintenance of posture, and it's also the working and moving of the large, particularly large muscles in our body that helps us produce heat. We looked at the nervous and endocrine systems and talked about the major regulating and coordinating systems of the endocrine system. We talked about how quickly the nervous system can send information by nerve impulses from one area of the body to the other, and how the endocrine system uses a complex chemical process using hormones and neurotransmitters secreted by glands into the bloodstream that occupy receptor sites on organs and cause specific actions. As an example, when adrenaline is released from the adrenaline glands and it gets into the bloodstream and it occupies the adrenergic receptors on the heart, it causes the heart rate to increase, the strength of contraction to increase, the speed of contraction to increase. We looked at the heart and the cardiovascular system and talked about how it was responsible for circulating blood through all the parts of the body, and how blood, particularly venous blood, carries carbon dioxide and waste away from tissues, and how arterial blood brings fresh oxygen and nutrients to those same tissues. We talked about how blood carries hormones that are produced by the endocrine system. We talk about how blood can regulate temperature as well, how it can balance fluid, and how it protects the body from bacteria and foreign substances with the components that are in blood. You know, blood will regulate body temperature. When we are cold, our vessels constrict, and that warm blood is shunted to our core, where it helps keep our core temperature warm and helps keep our body temperature up. Blood also helps us balance fluid, certainly by as it's being filtrated through the kidneys, and certain things within our blood like sodium and potassium and those sort of things are either excreted or retained. And then blood protects our body from bacteria and foreign substances with the white cells that are carried within that blood. The lymphatic system includes lymphocytes and lymph nodes, and is made up of certainly the tonsils, although there's no need for tonsils, and oftentimes if they're problematic they're just removed. They are part of the lymphatic system and the drainage in the throat. And then the spleen, how it will secrete chemicals in the lymph system as well. The thymus gland, located in the neck, and how it regulates calcium. And the lymphatic system's function is to maintain fluid balance, to absorb fats from digestive tract, and assist in immune defense. We looked at the organs of the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system, and how both are necessary to help move oxygen to the cells. You know, the movement of oxygen, or oxygenation, is getting gas from out in the room into our lungs, and ventilation is the mechanical process of how that happens. We looked also at how the cardiovascular system helps move carbon dioxide from the cells and get those back out into the air, or the exchange of gas. Essentially, we looked at how gas exchange occurs through the process known as diffusion in the lungs, where gases flow from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. We also talked about the different parts of the respiratory system, the upper airway beginning at the nasal cavity and ending at the larynx, and how the lower airway then begins at the glottis, or the vocal cords, and goes all the way down to the lungs. We looked at the digestive system and how it's important in extracting. The digestive system extracts the liquid and water that we take, how it actually extracts electrolytes and nutrients. We also looked at the urinary system and how it's important in helping us maintain homeostasis by certainly excreting things that we don't need and retaining things that we do. It also helps remove wastes from the blood, and it helps maintain a constant body fluid volume by either secreting or retaining sodium and potassium. The urinary system includes the kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. We looked briefly at the purpose of the male reproductive system, and how its main purpose is to transfer sperm to the female, and we looked at the female reproduction system, and how its main purpose is to make eggs and to receive the sperm for fertilization, conception, gestation, and birth. We looked at those parts of the male reproductive system to include the testes. We talked about the epididymis, the ductus deferens, the urethra, the seminal vesicles, the prostate glands, the bulbourethral glands, the scrotum, and the penis. We looked at the female reproduction system, talked about the ovaries and the uterine and fallopian tubes, the uterus and the vagina, and the external genital organs, as well as mammary glands, is all part of the female reproductive system. We know that senses provide the brain with information from the outside world, and we talked briefly about the main four senses that we recognized as being special: the sense of smell, taste, sight, hearing. And with that, as I had mentioned, this part 3 is short. I had anticipated that there would be much more discussion on the acid-base balance, but I further looked at it and figured out that that was in Chapter 8. So with that, Chapter 7 is all wrapped up. I thank you, and I will talk to you soon.